Hoy contamos en la mesa de análisis Comanche con Tariq Ali, escritor, historiador y director de cine. Tariq Ali, it is a pleasure to have you here with us in Canal Red. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
We have been talking about Netanyahu's impunity in the past year. We have been analyzing the Western support for Netanyahu. But today we wanted to analyze Netanyahu's main support within the Middle East. Which countries are key to understanding this regional support, and how is this support expressed?
I think the key countries are first Egypt. Egypt, historically a country which under Nasser and during the nationalist period supported the Palestinians, kept Israel at a distance, and was very sharp in its condemnations. That country then was bought off by the United States of America, billions of dollars a year. The high command of the army was bought off. The army was encouraged to become an industrial rather than an army of defense. And they had their own streets, their shops, etc. It's quite scandalous what happened. But this literally sold out. And as a reward for that, Anwar Sadat, the then president of Egypt, and Menachem Begin, the Prime Minister of Israel, were jointly given the Nobel Peace Prize. Begin for having agreed to make a public negotiation with Sadat, and Sadat for effectively carrying out the will of the Americans. What happened subsequently was that there was dissent inside the Egyptian army, and Sadat was blown up during a military parade by his own soldiers as they were meant to be walking past the podium to give the salute. After that, security became very tight, and Mubarak became a leader. The structures of Egypt really became like those of a moth-eaten country. It had lost its soul. Its leaders, especially its army, had capitulated completely to Israel and the United States of America. And it's been like that for many decades. In a nationalist Egypt, Israel would not have been able to do what it is doing. So that's the first country. The second, of course, is the money now being generated by petroleum, by gas, by other commodities in the peninsula itself. Here, Saudi Arabia is the key because they have the most oil, and they have been in the pocket of the Western powers for a long time. Lawrence of Arabia, who you showed on the screen not so long ago, helped to secure that deal, as did H.A.R. Philby, a senior intelligence figure. And the Wahhabis and the Saudi monarchy have been working first with Britain for many years, and then at the beginning of the Second World War, they switched to the United States. And since then, that has been the main ally of the West inside the Arab Peninsula, joined together now by the small Emirati states, the United Arab Emirates, which started off life as what? As imperial petrol stations, and were gradually built up. So now they have a lot of money. They can do more or less what they want in the financial markets, and internally and in foreign affairs, they are like Jordan, I would say, Israeli American protectorates. And this war has not brought about, till now, a mass uprising either in Egypt or in Jordan, the two countries where people themselves are very angry. The other countries are, of course, in the Maghreb. Morocco, its security system is supervised by the by the Israelis, and Tunisia has reverted to becoming a pro Western state. Algeria separates itself from them, but the majority of these Arab states, or their governments, we should say, not the people, have effectively decided to capitulate. Just before October the 7th last year, the Saudis were on the verge of recognizing Israel. Jordan has recognized Israel. The king goes on about this is unacceptable. Well, if it's unacceptable, just break off diplomatic trade relations with the Israelis. They can't even do a non violent protest against the Israelis. That's how bad the situation in the Arab world is.
Yes, very, very important what you are saying. I would like to ask
Sí, es muy
you, in
importante
the
lo que
last few
está
weeks, it
diciendo.
seems that
En las
Netanyahu has
últimas
become
semanas parece
unstoppable.
que Netanyahu
It
se ha
was getting
vuelto
quite obvious
imparable.
before,
Se
but since
estaba
the invasion of
haciendo algo
Lebanon
bastante
and the
obvio
bombings
antes, pero
in
desde la
Yemen and
invasión de
Syria and
Líbano
Gaza,
y
the
los
situation
bombardeos de
has
Yemen y Siria y
escalated.
Gaza, la
At
situación
this moment,
se ha
is there
escalado. En este
any
momento
way
hay
to
alguna
effectively
manera
face
de
Netanyahu from
hacer frente
within the region?
efectivamente a
Is there
Netanyahu
any
desde dentro de la
military
región.
or
Hay
political
alguna
way to
manera
stop his
política o
expansive
militar para
project?
detener su proyecto
Well,
expansivo.
I think militarily it would require a combined effort by all the Arab states, both in the Maghreb and in the Arab East, to unite and say enough is enough. We are not going to let this genocide go on, and send in the Egyptian army, which they did. You see, over the last decades, the United States has been backed by Israel, has been destroying the infrastructure and the military strength of three countries which had strong armies. Iraq, destroyed. Syria, destroyed. Lebanon, destroyed, its leader publicly lynched with the approval of Hillary Clinton. That's what's been going on. And this has removed any idea of a military opposition to Israel, which could have happened if these countries hadn't been completely destroyed by the United States. So, unless there's an uprising in Egypt and a change of government, I can't see any military response. I mean, the Yemenis, in my opinion, have been very courageous by bringing the Israeli port of Eilat to a complete halt because no one is ready to ensure merchant shipping going there. So that's been an effective thing by the Yemenis, which is why why the Houthis are being punished. But elsewhere, nothing has been done politically, in my opinion. The United States is perfectly capable of stopping this war. In the past, American presidents like Truman, like Reagan, like the first George Bush have put pressure on Israel and got their way. This particular regime of Genocide Joe, as the students call Biden, is incapable of bringing this to a stop. Two or three phone calls, two visits by the Pentagon generals and the Secretary of State saying enough, no more. It stops here. They don't do it. Netanyahu says they can't do it because we pay all their parliamentary members in Congress and Senate, or most of them, money. They're on our payroll. But the United States, if it genuinely believes that its own interests are being affected, could still do it. And that's what they've done. It's not the case that the Israeli tail wags the American dog. No, it's the American dog which has made the Israeli tail very large. That is what is going on. And it could be stopped politically, but neither the United States nor the European powers, with the exception of Spain and to a certain extent Ireland, have raised any objections. So all the big powers, Germany, Italy, France, Britain, collaborate totally with the Israeli government. Arab lives, we have to recognize this, that for many Europeans, Arab lives don't matter. They don't care how many Arab people die every day as long as they can have their croissants and coffee in their favorite cafes.
There are usually some parallels
Normalmente
made
hay
between
algunos
Netanyahu's
paralelos
acts
se hacen
and
entre
Hitler's.
los actos de
As a
Netanyahu y los de
historian,
Hitler.
in your
Como
opinion, are
historiador, en
these
tu opinión,
comparatives precise?
estas
Are
comparaciones
we
son
facing an
precisas.
unprecedented
Nos
moment
enfrentamos
of
a un
active
momento
or
sin
passive
precedentes
complicity
de
with the
complicidad
genocide, or if
activa o
not,
pasiva con un
what
genocidio, y
moment
si
in
no,
history
¿qué
does it
momento en la
remind you of?
historia te viene a la memoria?
I don't think that the comparison with the Third Reich is accurate. There are many, many differences which one could go into, but it's pointless. You know, the thing is that every time the West has attacked a leader for many decades, over 50 years, they call him Hitler. When Egypt, Israel, and France invaded Egypt in 1956, the British Prime Minister said that Gamal Abdel Nasser was the Hitler on the River Nile. When they went to attack Saddam in Iraq, they said he was the Hitler on the Tigris, on the river Tigris. When they went to attack Milosevic, he became another Hitler. Gaddafi became another Hitler. So the West uses the image of Hitler to identify all its enemies, and the opposition now is using the same methods to say, if these were all Hitlers, Netanyahu is the biggest Hitler of them all. But none of them were Hitlers, neither the Arabs who the West attacked and hated, nor Netanyahu. They are the products of something very much related to the Middle East, to its needs, and to the imposition. Frankly, if we look back now, the imposition after the First World War, not the Second, after the First World War, of a Zionist entity which grew and grew and grew. And we are now in a stage where I think we can rightly call Netanyahu and other Israeli leaders. It's not Netanyahu alone. And he, by the way, is supported by 60 to 70% of Israeli people. So you can't say he's alone. He's not alone. And he's supported by the West de facto. So this is a colonial power acting to destroy the resistance in a part of the world which they have occupied. I mean, you see Netanyahu going on, oh, we could transform the Arab world, we could give them latest technology, we could, grow potatoes in the air for them if we have to, and all this sort of nonsense. Well, the simple answer to that is, if you were going to do that, why didn't you offer that all to the Palestinians? Why did you keep crushing the Palestinians? Why didn't you allow sovereignty to the Palestinians? Why didn't you help them economically for depriving them of their country and continuing to deprive them of the country? So the lies of the West, the lies of the Israelis, and what the mainstream media doesn't report has played a part, actually, in enabling this genocide to happen.
Este genocidio.
Western. Last week
Hablando de
in the
Occidente,
UN
la
Assembly,
semana pasada, en la
Netanyahu had an
Asamblea
opportunity
de
to
Naciones
address
Unidas,
his plans
Netanyahu
to
tuvo
the
la
world
oportunidad
leaders.
de
What does it
plantear sus
say
planes
about
a los líderes
international law
mundiales.
and
¿Qué nos dice
international
esto sobre el
democratic
derecho
institution
internacional
in
y las
this
instituciones
particular
democráticas
scene?
internacionales en esta escena?
International law is dead. It has been killed. It is no longer effective. It died on the killing fields of Gaza. It dies in the West Bank every single day. It dies in the invasion of Lebanon, in the brutal assault on the Yemen. So we live in a world without any international law. By that I mean a universal law, a universal norm that is applicable to everyone and everybody, politicians and nation states, but it isn't. The whole thing now comes out into the open. The mask is off. International law is only for the enemies of the West, for no one else. I mean, the attempt to tell the International Court, the ICC, to withdraw its demand that Netanyahu be arrested as a war criminal. He's been the A lawyer has been threatened by the United States, he tells us, and by many EU countries as well as Britain, where he lives. So this is what is going on. So I think many people now know that what counts in the world is not international law, but the United States of America. It is what America wants that becomes a de facto international law. We decide you carry out our will, or we will pulverize you and finish you via Israel, where that is necessary, which it seems to them to be in the Middle East, or through various other relays we have in South America, in Asia, in the Far East. That's what's going on, and it's a changing face of the world. And the United Nations, to be perfectly frank, is irrelevant. I mean, the General Assembly has no powers at all, and the Security Council they can stop you doing something, they can veto you, and they can impose wars if there's no veto. But it's the members of the UN Security Council are hangovers from the Second World War. I mean, why is Britain a member of the UN? It's just a stooge satellite state of the United States. Why is France a member? I mean, I would understand Germany being made a member as the strongest state, though I do totally disagree with the German. I would agree with India becoming a member. I would agree with South Africa being made a member. But these are sort of Europeans who effectively won the Second World War, who were rewarded, and nothing has changed. It's become an inert body. And as Bush Jr. once said, where we can use the Security Council, we use that. Where we need allies, we use Britain, or we go it alone. But to that now should be added, and whenever we want, we can use the Israelis. And I think what the Americans are doing now in Israel and the Middle East is effectively saying, behind the scenes, though we can see it, what they are saying is, okay, this is an unpleasant business, but we've got the chance, let's do it. Whether that will end up in destroying the Iranian regime, uh, who knows? That is up for grabs. That is what Israel has been demanding. And the more unsavory members of the American ruling elite.
You said international law is dead.
Ha dicho que el derecho internacional está muerto, así que sobre este mismo asunto, una última cuestión que nos dice esto sobre las democracias liberales, cuando no hay ninguna institución capaz de detener a Netanyahu, es decir, nuestras democracias tal y como las conocíamos.
I think that what we are witnessing, I wrote a book many years ago called The Extreme Center, in which I suggested that the most favored government by capitalism in the West, is an extreme center government where it doesn't matter if it's the center left or the center right in power. And that is what we've been seeing. To this now, we have to add something new, that both the center left and the center right are quite happy to collaborate with the far right. We've seen it in France, where a unified front, a popular front nouvelle, led by Jean-Luc Mélenchon, won the largest vote, but they were not allowed to form a government. And that is a sign that France, always weak on democracy, is now exposed itself. You can elect people, but they will not be allowed to become the government because the president has too many powers. That's a classic example of that. On the other level, you see the way in which these so-called democracies were all lined up to back Israel in the genocide in the Middle East. Most of them backed that war. And the other aspect of democracy, which we used to be told was very important because it differentiated us from authoritarian governments, from communist governments, etc., was we have a free media. Look at the media. New York Times, Guardian in Britain, pathetic. Voices, effectively, of the saner sections of the US and British establishments. The rest of the media out of control. CNN and BBC World, which masquerade as the voices of freedom, their coverage has been totally appalling. It's very sad to see the BBC in this situation because they haven't gone this far in carrying out the orders of the United States and their own government as brutally and in the most servile fashion as they have now. So if you have the political structure effectively dominated by parties that completely support the system, which we have in many countries now, in Europe and the United States. I mean, Trump, they hate Trump because he's unpredictable. It's not because he's going to do policy A, B, or C, which they don't mind, but he's unpredictable, and that makes the Pentagon and others slightly nervous about him. But in terms of actual politics, how is he different from Biden? On the Middle East, he's the same or even worse than Biden. So it's a process that is taking place, which is the hollowing out of democracy. You know, they're taking all the meat out, and they're giving us increasingly in the Western world a democracy which is a set of rituals. We have elections every 5 years. We will stop governments from doing what they want to do, even if the people want it. I mean, the last thing to say on this is that even in Germany, a very large percentage of the population is opposed to the genocide. In France, the same. In Britain, between 60 and 70% are opposed to the war. In Spain, of course, your government is better than most governments, but the population too is against it. And this is the same in many Scandinavian countries. So you don't listen to your people. That encourages a tiny segment to go crazy and become terrorists. You don't allow political parties that are hostile to you or to NATO to function. In Britain now, we are seeing lots of venues not allowed, government owned, municipality owned meeting places. You can't use them if you want to organize a meeting on Palestine. And not just in London, in Scotland too, in England and in Scotland. So all these are encroachments on democracy, and where they will end and how far they will go, we will know over the next 10, 20 years.
Ya veremos en los
Tariq
20, 30
Ali,
años que
historian,
vengan. Tariq Ali,
writer, filmmaker,
historiador,
thank you very much for
escritor,
this
director,
conversation. It's been quite
muchas
an honor.
gracias por esta conversación. Ha sido un honor.